Yours now. Oh boy, does that mean I win? No, it means I win, because now I get to do this. Squarumph womp. That's a rough game, I know, but that's how adults play it. So, negotiating that adult world is one of the themes. You have also these amazing works that take what were interesting comic strips but turned into something even richer in these extended stories made that among the most popular comics of the 50s were the adaptations of the Dennis the Menace panels into these long stories by a team named O'Toole and Wiseman. Wiseman's drawing is fantastically precise. Here I just decided to have his Dennis descending the staircase panel on the bottom to just give a hint of him. But in the book you get some stories. Another chapter, Funny Animals, which is what the genre of the comics for the younger age spectrum of readers might have consisted of. And it included things like Walt Kelly's Hickory and Dickory, the sweetest kind of comics for very young children, born of Kelly's engagement as an animator working on Fantasia and Snow White, applied to that, bringing that sweetness to comics for very young kids and using his interest in having been a children's book illustrator when he was younger, juxtaposed with some of the funny uncle stuff I was describing, also somewhere in our book, of other kinds of funny animals. Here, in Animal Comics from Dell, on the left, a page by Walt Kelly's friend, Dan Noonan, one of two stories we have by him in the book, presented as a kind of Jack London for kids, seeing something from a dog's point of view, but a narrated story that has visual movement pulling you through the page of Rover, this kind of hobo dog, defending sheep from the wolves. And it's a real serious story, one of the few and most serious stories where we were pulling for humor that allowed you to get a sense of the life and death urgencies that could enter into the comics. But on the right, an early story by the guy who did Little Lulu, John Stanley, drawing himself rather than working with an artist, doing a story called Jiggs and Mooch, two characters, where Jiggs, the little white dog, pulls Mooch into the countryside, although Mooch prefers begging for scraps in the city because they could get their own food in the country. But when he sees a cow and that's where steak comes from, he decides he's more interested in the apple that they saw. He then goes over to back to the apple, but as soon as he gets there, a worm pops out, at which point he flees to the city saying, "So long, Jigger." "Hey, where are you going, Mooch?" "To the city where the food don't fight back." The flip side of the other story. Okay, then Fantasyland, another chapter dealing with the fantasy stories and comics that has to start with Walt Kelly because of his amazing fairy tale parade books, sumptuously drawn, inspired by the 19th century and early 20th century illustrators of children's books, and a page from a fairy tale we chose. Although he did adaptations, we chose one that's in the spirit of fairy tales that he did himself, about adults treating dwarves badly and then being shrunk down to child size where only a child can save them, and allowed the fantasies to move toward one of the few nods toward the superhero comics that I sort of veered away from as opening up this territory in comics. But there were a number of funny animal superheroes. One of the most beautifully done was some of the early Super Mouse stories. Super Mouse graces the cover in this story by Milt Stein, and his kind of very voluptuous and sumptuous children's animation style applied to comics, very precise at the same time. But on the other hand, we also have a John Stanley story where the world of fantasy and the dark aspects of reality combine, and there's a genuinely scary story that's Tubby drowning in quicksand as he's trying to catch a frog and finding himself in a ghost hotel, and ultimately is threatened with being fed to a character called Fear. Too much to read you the stories here tonight and give you the overview at the same time, but comics are about telling stories. And as a result, I brought this page because Harvey Kurtzman, the guy who created those Mad comics, had a lesson that he taught in class about, when he taught at the School of Visual Arts where I taught, about telling stories. And his metaphor was blowing up a balloon, filling that balloon until the suspense built and it had to pop. So that's the frontispiece of that section of the book where Albert gets to blow up a balloon while he sleeps and it pops. Leading into the other superhero we had, Captain Marvel, the only, the most popular superhero of all time. This really outsold Superman. It was aimed at younger kids, was done tongue-in-cheek, and eventually led to a lawsuit where Superman managed to win on a technicality and kind of wipe Captain Marvel out. But this story that was found to us by one of the members of our board of advisors, because we needed all the help we could get on this book. Jeff Smith, who did a series of Captain Marvel stories, the creator of Bone, said, well, this is one I liked when looking through all the old Captain Marvels, and it worked for me, Captain Marvel in the Land of Surrealism. And of course, the greatest storyteller in comics, except possibly for John Stanley, who did those Lulu things, Carl Barks. We chose several stories. One of the more hair-raising adventures was our adventure in getting the licensing rights from Disney to do this. But it was important to do. Like, here's a story in which Uncle Scrooge, the world's richest duck, a character invented by Barks, not to be confused with, like I said, the animated cartoon Donald Ducks of the classic era, is being driven nuts by